And we are back to the #1 UFC picks podcast in the world, No Brainer MMA. If you have a gambling problem, guys, please, please, please take it somewhere else. We're going to get right into this. Rob Font versus Adrian Yanez. Pretty interesting fight here. One side, you got a UFC veteran on back-to-back losses with multiple knockdowns in each fight. And on the other hand, you have an up-and-coming prospect that hasn't really been tested yet. He is 5-0 in the UFC with all those fights, either performance of the night or fight of the night. And 4 of those fights were by knockout. There's a lot of question marks surrounding this fight, and I'm curious to see how this one turns out. But I'm going to start with UFC veteran Rob Font. He's a very technical boxer. Fights out of the same gym as Calvin Kattar, and both have a very similar fight style. Super fundamental in his striking, but nothing really too much behind it. But has very high volume and has an outpoint over power fight style. And he's just always throwing something out there. He is on a 2-fight losing streak to some very high competition, Jose Aldo and Marlon Vera. But he's actually breaking bantamweight records even in his losses. He now holds the record for the most significant strikes and most total strikes landed in bantamweight history. And the only other fight in UFC history that has more strikes is Max Holloway when he fought Calvin Kattar. Font landed 271 significant strikes over Marlon Vera and 149 against Jose Aldo, but did fall short in both fights. Fights are judged by damage over numbers, and Font definitely was the one getting beat up in those fights, even though he did land like double the strikes. And to be honest, I think his fight versus Vera was a little too soon after his loss with Jose Aldo. Rob Font's never been knocked out in any of his 25 pro fights, and he was knocked down twice in that Jose Aldo fight. 4.5 months later, he goes and he fights one of the hardest hitters in the bantamweight division. And to top it all off, he missed weight by 2.5 pounds going into that fight with a botched weight cut. So that definitely had an effect on his chin going into that fight. It's been a year since we've seen Font, and which is probably a good move for him. He probably needed some time to heal. He's now spring chicken. He's 35 years old. Now he's taking on Adrian Yanez, who is a very fun guy to watch. Like Font, he's also a very technical boxer. Just like how Adesanya versus Pereira is going to be a very technical Muay Thai match, basically, this is going to be a boxing match. The big difference between these two is Yanez hits like a fucking Mack truck. He's got insanely heavy hands for the division. This matchup is a real perfect example of power versus numbers. But something I don't like about Yanez, though, maybe it's his inexperience, but he relies a lot on his toughness and his chin. Yanez is not afraid to get into wars because he's so tough and, his chin holds up. And the odds are if he gets you into a brawl, then he's going to knock you out. But he hasn't faced nearly the same level of competition as Font. The toughest guy he fought was Davey Grant probably 2 fights ago and ended in a split decision. And in the fight before that, he fought Randy Costa, and he just got beat up the whole first round before Randy Costa did his thing and gassed out completely. But it was still very close, and we found out Randy Costa was not UFC caliber. It was way too soon for the guy. That toughness fight style, though, can only get you so far. Like I said, this is a tough one to call because all the question marks. Is Rob Font over the hill? He's the 3rd oldest bantamweight in the top 15, only behind Dominic Cruz and Pedro Munoz. He's been knocked down 5 times in his last 2 fights. Or is Yanez ready for this level of competition, or is it too soon? And honestly, I don't think Rob's chin is gone. I don't think he's over the hill. I do think that he had a string of unfortunate shit happen to him. He got rocked by Aldo, came back too soon against a really tough guy, and I think that's what it was. So I'm going to go with Rob Font in this one.